So much for checking out my show. Really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. Appreciate all the support. It's been 89 days now since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home right here, right up that driveway, Tucson, Arizona. I can't believe I've been covering this now for 89 days, since February 1st, pretty much. And you guys have seen me interview a lot of FBI profilers, retired FBI profilers, people whose entire job was to look at a case and try to figure out who the offender is. And one way that they do that is they have this database of information that they collect by interviewing criminals, by going into prisons and interviewing some of the most dangerous criminals that exist, whether it be rapists or murderers or kidnappers, abductors, you name it, they will go in and interview these people. And what's so important about that is they'll spend days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months talking to people, putting all of that information into a database. And then what they can do is when they come out and they look into a case like the Nancy Guthrie case that is unsolved, they can go back and look at all that information that they've collected on past cases and try to determine a profile of who is responsible, which is what we are told is happening behind the scenes likely right now with the Nancy Guthrie case.
The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie from her quiet Tucson home on February 1, 2026, has evolved from a frantic search for a missing grandmother into one of the most psychologically complex criminal investigations in modern history. Brian Entin, as a reporter who has walked the perimeter of her Catalina Foothills property and spoken to the neighbors now living in a state of hypervigilance, I can tell you that the forensics on the ground tell only half the story. The other half lies in the minds of the men who have spent their lives staring into the void of the human psyche, the original FBI Mindhunters. When he sat down with retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente and other veterans of the Behavioral Analysis Unit, the focus wasn't just on the grainy doorbell footage or the blood on the porch, but on the invisible fingerprints of the suspect's personality. These profilers, who built the very foundation of how we catch serial offenders by interviewing monsters in maximum security prisons, see this case not as a series of random events, but as a carefully choreographed display of an offender's inner needs. To understand how the FBI is dismantling the suspect's mind, you have to understand the environment he chose.
So I was really interested in this process and what it is actually like to go into a maximum security prison and try to essentially pick the brain of a really dangerous, awful human being. So that's what I'm going to get into in this episode. I want to start off by talking to Jim Clemente. He is a retired FBI profiler about this process. And you have a suspect that you are able to talk to.
Okay. So in the beginning, in the early days of the behavioral science unit, which then evolved into the behavioral analysis unit, the original profilers interviewed 38 serial offenders after conviction. And the way they did that is they typically waited a certain period of time and then approached them after they felt that the offender had realized they were going to spend the rest of their lives in prison and they've lost all control over what happens to them. And they basically would, at that point, feel like they are going to eventually just die in obscurity. We used that to our advantage by basically building up their egos, telling them we wanted to study them, we wanted to learn from them. And then these offenders started to agree to be interviewed by the people in the behavioral science unit. And eventually that evolved into empirical studies. Those were anecdotal interviews, but now, and from the time I was in the behavioral analysis unit, we developed a protocol, and I believe it was somewhere in the area of 840 questions that we would go through with every single serial offender who agreed to talk to us. And we would do that for every crime they committed. And many times that was accomplished because we basically built up their ego. Other times we were able to get the prosecutor and the judge to agree to demand that and to order that of the offender in order to do things like take the death penalty off the table. And there have been people, I think, who've complained about that because that's what the offender wanted. But that's absolutely true. It is what the offender wants. But we're using that basically against the offender. We're using that to gain more information so that we can actually profile crimes, hopefully educate people in the public, and prevent these kinds of crimes from happening in the future. But also, once they do start happening, it will help us to stop serial offenders in their tracks, prevent them from going on indefinitely killing people.
Nancy Guthrie was what profilers call a low-risk victim in a low-risk environment. She was an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility who lived a quiet, predictable life in an affluent neighborhood with virtually no crime. For a predator, this is not a target of opportunity. It is a target of intent. The BAU experts point to the timeline as the first major window into the suspect's level of sophistication. At 1:47 a.m., he didn't just smash a window. He began a methodical deactivation of her security systems. He disconnected the doorbell camera, but more tellingly, he returned at 2:12 a.m. to tamper with the lens using foliage. Before we move on, kindly take a moment to subscribe. This suggests a person who is comfortable in the dark, someone who had likely conducted a dress rehearsal or reconnaissance of the property. When the pacemaker monitor at Nancy's bedside missed its 2:28 a.m. transmission, it signaled the exact moment her environment was breached and she was removed. This window of less than an hour shows a suspect who worked with a surgical, almost professional efficiency. The Mindhunters look at these actions and see a power-assertive or power-reassurance offender. Jim Clemente noted that the suspect's movements on camera were slow, non-jerky, and displayed a chilling lack of concern. This comfort level indicates that the suspect didn't just know the neighborhood, he felt he owned it. The way he carried his weapon, placed awkwardly in a holster over his crotch, and his specific gear, a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack and black gloves, suggests a person who sees themselves as a character in their own tactical narrative. This isn't a desperate person looking for quick cash. This is someone who has spent a long time fantasizing about this specific moment. The profilers believe this individual likely has a history of smaller boundary violations, peeping, trespassing, or stalking, that escalated into this high-risk abduction. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Mindhunter analysis involves the motive of retribution. Dr. Ann Burgess, a pioneer in the FBI's profiling program, has suggested that because Nancy is the mother of a world-famous news anchor, the abduction might be a proxy attack. In the suspect's twisted logic, he may feel he has a relationship with the Guthrie family through the television screen. By taking Nancy, he is finally forcing himself into their lives, moving from an anonymous viewer to the most important person in their world. The ransom notes sent to media outlets like KOLD-TV and TMZ, rather than directly to the family, reinforce this need for a stage. He isn't just seeking money, he is seeking the ultimate proof of existence. He wants the world to watch him. The forensics are now catching up to the psychological profile. The FBI is currently sifting through DNA evidence, including hair and potential saliva samples from the suspect's mask, using advanced genetic genealogy. But as the investigation enters its fourth month, the Mindhunters are looking for the leakage, the small changes in the suspect's behavior after the crime. Someone in Tucson knows a man who became suddenly obsessed with the news in February, someone who changed his routine or became inexplicably agitated when the FBI released those black and white images. If you have gone this far, take a moment to subscribe. Thank you. The profilers know that while the suspect thinks he is playing a game of chess with the world, he is actually leaving a trail of psychological breadcrumbs that will eventually lead back to his door. They are getting inside his head, waiting for the one mistake that every organized offender eventually makes when their ego finally outpaces their caution. The psychological architecture of this crime suggests a suspect who suffers from a profound sense of inadequacy in his own life, which he compensates for through extreme control and pseudo-commando aesthetics. When the Mindhunters look at the choice of the Ozark Trail backpack and the specific tactical vest, they don't see a soldier. They see a civilian who is role-playing a position of power. This type of offender often has a history of failed military or law enforcement aspirations, someone who surrounds himself with the gear of authority because he lacks the actual discipline to earn it. By taking a woman as high profile as Nancy Guthrie, he is attempting to level up in his own delusional hierarchy. He isn't just a kidnapper in his mind. He is a mastermind engaging in a war of wits with the federal government. This is why the lack of physical struggle in the house is so significant to profilers. It suggests that he either used a high level of verbal manipulation to gain her compliance, or he utilized overwhelming force so quickly that her fight or flight response was short-circuited. Furthermore, the decision to send communications to news outlets rather than the family speaks to a narcissistic wound. He likely feels ignored by society and believes that by holding the mother of a national news icon, he has finally forced the world to listen to him. The Mindhunters analyze the syntax of his letters, looking for signature, words or phrases that might link him to previous unsolved cases or manifestos posted in fringe online communities. They are looking for a man who is likely a collector, someone who keeps news clippings of the case, follows social media threads about cold trail crime, and perhaps even visits the perimeter of the crime scene to relive the moment of the abduction. This return to the scene is a classic behavioral trait of the power-assertive offender. It provides a trophy of sorts, a way to stand among the investigators and feel superior, because he knows the truth that they are desperately seeking. In the quiet of the FBI's Quantico offices, the analysis turns toward the suspect's domestic life. This is likely not a lone wolf living in a cabin, but rather someone who might be hiding in plain sight. Perhaps a neighbor, a local contractor, or a delivery driver who had a legitimate reason to be in the Catalina Foothills. The Mindhunters suggest that his behavior in the weeks following February 1st would have been marked by a hyperfixation on the case, followed by a period of withdrawal or decompressing. He may have missed work, started drinking more heavily, or became uncharacteristically aggressive when the Guthrie family made their televised pleas. The FBI is betting on the fact that while he can mask his face from a camera, he cannot mask the fundamental shifts in his personality that occur when the weight of such a high-stakes crime begins to press down on him. They are waiting for the moment his ego transforms into exhaustion, because that is when the mask truly slips. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more.